Hollywood may have made film noir famous, but France gave it teeth. While everyone raves about Bogart lighting a cigarette in a rain-soaked alley, the French were crafting shadows even darker, stories even sharper. What if I told you some of the most gripping noirs weren't made in Los Angeles at all, but in Parisian backstreets and smoky cafes? Ready to discover the forgotten French noirs that can stare Hollywood down without blinking? Let's begin. Pépé le Moko, 1937. Before Humphrey Bogart wore a fedora, there was Jean Gabin, brooding in the Casque. Pépé le Moko isn't just a French noir, it's the blueprint that Hollywood would steal, polish, and repackage for decades. Set in the labyrinth of Algiers, the film tells the story of Pépé, a charismatic gangster who's both trapped and protected by the maze of streets and alleys. Police can't touch him there, but he also can't leave. He's free, but he's imprisoned, the perfect noir paradox. Julien Duvivier directs it with a mix of exotic atmosphere and crushing inevitability. And Gabin, he's magnetic. The way he shifts between charm and despair makes you believe he could inspire loyalty with a glance and betray it with the same ease. What makes Pépé le Moko unforgettable is how it turns a gangster tale into a tragedy about longing. When Pépé falls for a glamorous Parisian woman, it isn't just love, it's the reminder of a world he can never go back to. Sound familiar? That's because Hollywood lifted the concept almost wholesale for Casablanca. The romantic exile, the impossible choices, the bittersweet ending, they all start here. But unlike Casablanca's warm glow, Pépé le Moko is colder, sharper, more fatalistic. This is French noir before noir had a label. It's not just a story about crime. It's about the walls we build around ourselves, the prisons we decorate with charm, and the inevitability of fate catching up no matter how clever you are. Hollywood may have polished the formula, but Duvivier's raw edges cut deeper. Le jour, lève, 1939. If Pépé le Moko was about being trapped in a city, Le jour se lève is about being trapped in your own choices. Marcel Carné's bleak masterpiece takes place almost entirely in one room, and yet it feels more claustrophobic than any alley in Los Angeles. Jean Gabin again takes the lead, this time as François, a working-class man who kills someone in the opening scene and then barricades himself in his apartment as the police surround him. From there, the story unfolds in flashbacks, peeling back the reasons that led to the killing. And here's the kicker. None of them are clean. François is no angel, but he's not a monster either. He's just a man crushed by jealousy, manipulation, and the inevitability of human weakness. Sound like noir to you? Exactly. The film's visual style, dripping with shadows and cigarette smoke, screams noir, even though it predates the American craze. But what makes Le Jour se lève so powerful is its refusal to give the audience a clean escape. The walls close in tighter with every flashback, and you realize there's no Hollywood rescue, no happy turn waiting around the corner. When it was released, the film rattled nerves in France. Its raw fatalism felt like a warning of what was to come, just on the eve of World War II. Later, it was banned by the Vichy government for being too demoralizing. That alone should tell you how heavy its impact was. Hollywood may have made noir stylish, but Carné made it suffocating. Watching François smoke in that room, waiting for the inevitable knock at the door, you don't just see a character's downfall. You feel the dread of time itself running out. That's noir at its most primal. Quai des Orfèvres, 1947. By the late 1940s, noir was everywhere, but leave it to Henri-Georges Clouzot, the French Hitchcock, to take it somewhere darker. Quai des Orfèvres is set in the Paris music hall scene, and it begins with glitz, music, and a struggling singer who just wants her shot at fame. But beneath the stage lights lies jealousy, betrayal, and, eventually, murder. The plot: a husband, driven by insecurity, stalks his wife's wealthy admirer, and before long, the man ends up dead. The singer and her husband scramble to cover their tracks, but what really sells the film isn't the crime itself. It's the way Clouzot lingers on the rot underneath glamorous surfaces. Parisian nightclubs may sparkle, but the people inside them, they're dripping with envy and desperation. Clouzot had already been accused of being too dark with Le Corbeau, and here he doubles down. His camera refuses to flatter. Every glance looks suspicious. Every smile feels like a lie. And then there's the inspector, a sharp but strangely compassionate man who seems to know that most crimes are just human weakness exploding at the wrong time. Quai des Orfèvres isn't the kind of noir with gunfights and trench coats. Instead, it's psychological noir, built on people gnawing at each other with ambition and fear. That's what makes it devastating. By the time the truth unravels, you realize Clouseau isn't just telling a murder story. He's showing how ordinary people can destroy themselves, trying to claw out of mediocrity. It's forgotten today, overshadowed by American heavy hitters. But Quai des Orfèvres is proof that French noir could strip glamour off its bones and stare at the ugly heart beneath. Panique, 1946. Few films earn the word merciless, but Panique wears it like a badge. Julien Duvivier, fresh off exile during World War II, returned to France and unleashed a film that feels like a punch to the gut. Starring Michel Simon, one of the great chameleons of French cinema, Panique is a story of suspicion, mob mentality, and how quickly fear turns neighbors into predators. Simon plays Monsieur Hire, a lonely, man with strange habits who becomes the perfect scapegoat when a murder rocks his neighborhood. Never mind evidence, never mind truth. The crowd needs someone to blame, and Hire fits the role. Duvivier doesn't soften the blows either. He shoots the angry mob like a pack of animals, their faces twisted by hate, their judgment fueled by rumor instead of reason. If you're thinking this sounds eerily modern, you're not wrong. The themes of scapegoating and public hysteria are timeless, which is why Panique still feels sharp. And Simon's performance? Haunting. He brings a raw vulnerability to Hire, making his downfall feel less like the end of a character, and more like a condemnation of society itself. At the time, audiences didn't exactly embrace it, maybe because post-war France wasn't eager to look at itself in such an unflattering mirror. But critics later reappraised Panique as one of the great French noirs, and with good reason. Unlike Hollywood noirs, which often offered a kind of glamorous doom, Panique is stripped of style. It's ugly, it's cruel, and it doesn't flinch. Watching it, you realize Duvivier wasn't interested in giving audiences an escape. He wanted to rub their noses in the cruelty they were capable of. That's noir in its most unforgiving form. Casque d'Or, 1952. By the early 1950s, French noir took a seductive turn, and Casque d'Or sits right at that crossroads of beauty and brutality. Directed by Jacques Becker, it stars Simone Signoret in one of her most iconic roles, Marie, known by her golden hair that gives the film its title. She's radiant, irresistible, and dangerous simply because men can't stop destroying themselves over her. The story is classic noir, but with a French twist. Marie falls for a carpenter, an honest man who wants nothing to do with the Paris underworld. Of course, crime doesn't let go so easily. Rivalries erupt, gangsters circle, and before long, love turns into a battlefield where no one gets out clean. What sets Casque d'Or apart is Becker's direction. He treats the Paris underworld not as a gritty backdrop, but as a tragic stage where doomed lovers act out their parts. The sunlight in the opening scenes fools you into thinking this might be a romance. By the final act, that same light feels like judgment, exposing everything the characters can't hide. And then there's Signoret. She doesn't just play a femme fatale, she reinvents it. Instead of the cold manipulator you'd expect, her Marie feels achingly human. She's not setting traps, she's caught in one herself. That's what makes the tragedy sting. When love collides with the ruthless code of the criminal world, even the most genuine affection gets crushed. Though it wasn't a box office smash when released, Casque d'Or later became a touchstone for directors exploring how noir could be both intimate and epic. It proved that French noir didn't need to mimic Hollywood shadows. It could carve its own, softer-looking, but equally deadly paths. Touchez au grisbi, 1954. If American noir had Humphrey Bogart's cool detachment, French noir had Jean Gabin's weary gravitas. Touchez au grisbi proves it. By the mid-1950s, Gabin was no longer the youthful rebel of Pépé le Moko. Here, he's older, heavier, but sharper. A gangster who's pulled off a perfect heist and just wants to cash in and retire quietly. Sounds easy, right? Not in Noir. The film opens with Gabine's character, Max, moving through smoky clubs and backroom deals with an almost aristocratic calm. He's a professional, a survivor, someone who knows the game better than anyone else. But of course, loyalty in the criminal world is as fragile as cigarette ash. His old friend betrays him, and suddenly Max has to fight not just for the loot, but for his life. Becker directs with elegance. Unlike the flashy gunplay of American noirs, the tension here builds in glances, silences, and half-finished sentences. You can feel history in every exchange, old friendships, old grudges, all simmering under the surface. And when violence does erupt, it hits with the force of inevitability, not spectacle. Critics at the time called it a new kind of gangster film. Instead of young punks rising and falling, Touchez or grisbi shows what happens when age and fatigue weigh on men who've lived in the shadows too long. It's noir slowed down to a fatalistic crawl, every scene dripping with the melancholy of endings. This isn't just a crime story. It's a meditation on the impossibility of escape from betrayal, from time, from the life you chose. Gabin's tired eyes say it all. In Noir, there's no retirement plan. Rififi, 1955. If French Noir needed a film to announce itself to the world, Jules Dassin's Rififi was it. And here's the twist. Dassin wasn't even French. Blacklisted in Hollywood during the Red Scare, the American director fled to Paris. And what did he do? He made one of the greatest heist films in cinema history. Talk about revenge. The story is simple, but razor sharp. 4 men plot a jewel heist in Paris. They're professionals, meticulous, and the plan seems airtight. The centerpiece of the film, and the reason it's legendary, is the 30-minute heist sequence shot in total silence. No dialogue, no music, just the sound of tools, breath, and tension, so thick you could cut it with a diamond. To this day, it's considered one of the most nerve-shredding scenes ever filmed. But here's the noir punch. Perfection doesn't matter. The crew pulls off the heist flawlessly, only for greed, betrayal, and fate to unravel everything. That's the essence of noir, not crime and punishment, but crime and collapse. Dassin directs with precision, but he also brings an outsider's edge. You can feel his bitterness at Hollywood in every grim beat, as if he's saying, "Fine, you won't let me work there. Watch me redefine your genre here." And redefine it he did. Filmmakers from Kubrick to Tarantino have cited Rififi as a touchstone. At release, the French police even tried to ban it, claiming it was a textbook for burglars. That tells you how real it felt. And yet, decades later, it remains the gold standard for heist films. Hollywood gave us glitz, Rififi gave us grit, and grit lasts longer. Bob le Flambeur, 1956. Jean-Pierre Melville wasn't just a director, he was the godfather of French noir. And with Bob le Flambeur, he gave us something Hollywood never quite dared, a noir that felt both tragic and oddly playful. Bob is an aging gambler, half gangster, half gentleman, and fully addicted to the rush of risk. The setup? Bob plans a casino heist. He's got experience, charm, and a loyal crew. But here's the catch. Bob can't resist gambling. His addiction isn't a side note, it's the story. Imagine Danny Ocean if he couldn't stop blowing the loot at the blackjack table. That's Bob. Melville shoots Paris like no one else. Early morning streets, empty cafes, neon lights fading into dawn. It's both glamorous and lonely. The film feels like it's caught between two worlds. The romantic nostalgia of old gangsters and the crisp realism of what would soon become the French New Wave. And Bob himself, he's not a hero, not a villain, just a man undone by his own nature. That's what makes him unforgettable. In American noirs, characters often fall because of women or rivals. In Bob le Flambeur, the enemy is the mirror. Bob can't stop being who he is, and that's what destroys him. When it came out, the film wasn't a hit. But a decade later, new wave directors like Godard were calling it revolutionary. You can see its DNA in Breathless, in Ocean's 11, in every stylish heist film that toys with cool irony. Bob's story proves the noir truth. Luck always runs out. And for gamblers like him, That's the only ending that makes sense. Elevator to the gallows, 1958. What happens when a murder plot goes wrong before it even begins? That's the cruel joke at the heart of Louis Malle's Elevator to the Gallows. Released in 1958, it's both a noir thriller and a launchpad for French modern cinema. The film begins with a perfect crime. A businessman plans to kill his boss, using his mistress as motivation and his military training for precision. Everything is calculated. But then, a tiny mistake. He gets trapped in an elevator. Yes, literally stuck between floors while the world unravels outside. Meanwhile, a young couple steals his car, goes joyriding, and ends up in their own spiral of crime and paranoia. The stories crisscross, feeding each other's chaos until the whole thing collapses into tragedy. What makes the film iconic isn't just the plot, though. It's the mood. Miles Davis improvised the score in a single recording session, watching the footage as he played. The result? A smoky, melancholic, and soundtrack that drips despair into every frame. No Hollywood orchestral bombast here, just trumpet notes hanging in the air like ghosts. And Jean Moreau, wandering the streets of Paris, face lit by neon and rain. That's noir poetry. She doesn't need dialogue to sell the weight of doomed love. Her expression says it all. Elevator to the Gallows was Malle's first feature, but it feels like the work of a veteran. The irony, the fatalism, the way chance twists lives into knots. It's pure noir. Yet it also hints at the French New Wave, with its restless energy and refusal to play by old rules. If noir is about fate laughing at our plans, Elevator to the Gallows might be its cruelest punchline. Le Doulos, 1962. By the early 1960s, noir had evolved, but Melville wasn't about to let go of shadows and betrayal. Le Doulos is his purest crime tale, stripped to the bone. The title itself is slang for hat, but also for informer, and that double meaning is the entire movie. Who's loyal? Who's lying? Who's playing who? You'll be second-guessing every scene. The film follows a thief just released from prison who immediately dives back into planning a robbery. His friend, played by Jean-Paul Belmondo, is either his closest ally or his greatest enemy, and Melville makes sure you never feel sure which. Conversations play like duels. A smile could be friendship or betrayal. That's the tension. What's genius here is how Melville refuses to spoon-feed. He drops you into a world of criminals who already know each other's histories, secrets, and grudges. You're left scrambling to piece it together, just like an outsider stepping into the underworld. The effect? You're not watching noir, you're living it. Stylistically, it's peak Melville. Long coats, dim apartments, rain-slicked streets, and silence heavy enough to crush you. The violence, when it comes, is quick and brutal, stripped of glamour. At first, Le Doulos confused audiences. Some thought it was too opaque, too slow, but critics later hailed it as one of Melville's masterpieces, a blueprint for crime cinema that directors from Tarantino to John Woo would later borrow from. In the end, Le Doulos doesn't give you clean answers, just layers of betrayal, and maybe that's the point. In noir, the truth isn't what sets you free, it's what gets you killed. Le deuxième souffle, 1966. If Le Doulos was Melville at his most stripped down, Le deuxième souffle is him building noir into an epic. Clocking in at nearly 2.5 hours, it's a heavyweight of French crime cinema. At the center is Lino Ventura as Gu, a veteran gangster who escapes from prison with only one goal, one last job before disappearing forever. Sound familiar? Sure. But Melville takes the cliché and turns it into something mythic. Gu isn't just a criminal. He's a man chained to the idea of honor in a world that no longer believes in it. The criminal code he lives by is already outdated, but he clings to it anyway, even when it puts him in danger. The heist sequence here rivals Rififi in precision, but what really makes the film sting is the way betrayal worms its way into every corner. Friends sell each other out, police manipulate criminals, and everyone is playing both sides. The title translates to the second breath. And that's exactly what it feels like, an old man trying to inhale one more time in a world that's already moved on without him. Ventura's performance is monumental. His Gu is gruff, stoic, and magnetic, a man who commands respect even as his time runs out. Melville shoots him like a tragic hero, a noir samurai out of place in modern France. In Hollywood, gangsters often went down in flames. In Melville's France, they suffocated under the weight of their own honor. And that's even darker. Classe, tous, risques, 1960. Claude Sauté isn't the first name people think of when it comes to noir, but Classe, tous, risques might be one of the most underrated French crime films ever made. Jean Gabin was the elder statesman of noir by then, and here he plays Abel Davos, a once-feared gangster on the run after years in exile. He's trying to get back to Paris with his wife and children, hoping for safety. Spoiler, noir doesn't do safety. The opening is brutal, a daylight getaway that spirals into violence almost immediately. Abel loses more than just money. He loses the little chance he had left at normalcy. From there, the film shifts into something unusual, a noir that's also about fatherhood. Abel drags his kids through the underworld, a man torn between survival and the crushing reality that his life choices have doomed his family too. Enter a young Jean-Paul Belmondo, fresh-faced but already magnetic. As the loyal outsider who helps Abel, Belmondo represents the future of French cinema. Watching him and Gabin together feels like noir passing the torch from one generation to the next. What makes Classe, tous, risques remarkable is its humanity. Abel isn't painted as a monster, but as a man suffocating under the weight of his past. The film's violence is quick and unsentimental, but the real tragedy is the quiet moments, Abel comforting his children, even as he knows he can't save them from his fate. In a genre often dominated by lone wolves, Classe, tous, risques adds a heartbreaking twist. What happens when the wolf has a family in tow? Symphony pour un massacre 1963. If you want pure, undiluted noir nastiness, look no further than Jacques Deré's Symphony pour un massacre. The premise is deceptively simple. 5 men, supposedly friends, pool their money for a big drug deal. But in noir, trust is just another word for weakness. And here, betrayal is practically a character in itself. One man decides he wants the whole pot for himself. His betrayal sets off a chain reaction of double crosses, paranoia, and revenge. By the end, the symphony of the title feels less like music and more like the sound of knives sliding into backs. What makes the film fascinating is its almost surgical focus on greed. There are no romantic subplots, no noble detectives, no glamorous backdrops. Just men sitting around tables, whispering lies while plotting each other's destruction. D-Ray directs with a cold eye, refusing to dress up the ugliness with style. Every betrayal feels inevitable, every gunshot like punctuation in a sentence you already knew was ending badly. The cast, led by Jean Rochefort and Charles Vanel, sells the paranoia perfectly. You can see the fear sweating off their brows as their so-called partnership dissolves. It's like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion, except every card has a knife hidden behind it. Forgotten today, overshadowed by flashier noirs of the era, Symphony pour un massacre is a reminder that sometimes the darkest noir stories aren't about love or destiny. They're about money, pure and simple, and nothing destroys friendship faster. Unflick, 1972. Fittingly, we end with Melville's last film, Unflick. If his earlier works were gritty and alive, this one feels like a ghost, cold, distant, and stripped bare. Starring Alain Delon as a police inspector and Richard Crenna as a suave criminal, it's a cat-and-mouse story, where both hunter and hunted seem equally hollowed out. From the first scene, Melville sets the tone, a bank robbery staged in near silence with his signature precision. But unlike Rififi or Le Deuxième Souffle, the tension here feels almost drained, as if the characters know from the start that fate has already sealed their endings. Delon's inspector isn't heroic. He's detached, almost robotic, as if duty has consumed whatever humanity he once had. Crenna's gangster is no better, smooth on the outside, empty inside. The film doesn't present their duel as good versus evil. It's just one shade of gray circling another. There's a helicopter heist sequence that, at the time, felt groundbreaking, but even that plays less like spectacle and more like ritual. Every move is choreographed, every gesture fatalistic. By the end, the film feels less like a thriller and more like a requiem for the entire noir tradition. Critics were divided. Some thought it too cold, too lifeless. But in hindsight, Un Flick reads like Melville's final statement. Noir has always been about emptiness at the core of human ambition. Here, he strips away even the romance of doom and leaves only silence. It's not just Melville's farewell. It's noir itself, staring into the void. So, there you have it. 14 French noirs that don't just rival Hollywood, they sometimes outdo it. From smoky clubs to cold betrayals, these films prove that France didn't just borrow noir, it redefined it. Which one shocked you most? Have you seen any of these overlooked gems? Or are you about to dive into the shadows for the first time? Drop your thoughts below, hit that subscribe, and remember, the shadows aren't just in Hollywood. Paris had plenty of its own.